At long last, hero, you've fallen right into my ingenious trap. With but a push of the button, the disintegration panel you're standing on will reduce you to atoms. Ah ha 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 ha! Hey there, kiddos, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank. You are having a great day, and in today's video, I'd like to sit back in my wonderfully squeaky chair, relax, and have a little conversation with all of you guys about this guy, Claude the Crab, or more specifically, Beanie Babies as a whole. And I'm going to be placing him on top of this little stack of Atari games because we're also talking about Atari games in this video, because Beanie Babies and Atari games both have something in common. They are both collectibles, stuffed toys, video games, things you might like to just have on display or enjoy and play with and all that jazz. Very loud cars zipping right through. They're both collectibles that have both experienced massive collapses in their secondary market prices at some point in the past. And while many people will not give them a second glance when at like flea markets or retro stores or whatever, both do have some collectability to them, some desirability to them. And I think it's important that we look at failures of the past to get an idea of where the TCG market could theoretically head in the future, because right now we are in a very interesting position when it comes to the world of trading card games. We have had unprecedented price spikes for usually modern, but not exclusively modern, products from several different card games, where a lot of speculative, investor bro minded individuals have kind of rushed into the hobby, buying everything up to try and make a quick buck. And in the past, a lot of this speculative mindset, a lot of this hyper aggressive investing, flipping mindset has preceded some of the most devastating financial crashes we've seen in the respective asset classes that experienced them. I'm not just talking about collectibles. I'm, of course, referring to things like the stock market, housing bubbles, etc., where irrational investors looking for quick and easy money bought in right at the tippy top before a really bad readjustment of the secondary market prices for a lot of those items. And obviously this is not going to be a history video. I'm not going to go into the history of Beanie Babies or Atari games or the stock market or the 2008 crash or the Tulip Mania. I think I covered Tulip Mania on the channel, right? But instead, I want to look at things like Beanie Babies and Atari games, and maybe even stocks. Stocks is a good one. To just kind of explain that while there is a lot of reason to be cautious about the current state of the TCG market, I don't think there's necessarily cause to panic about the current state of the TCG market. Be worried, be cautious, and maybe don't put all your eggs in one basket. But looking at the failures of the past, it's kind of plain to see, at least in my opinion, that as long as some collectability, some desirability remains, any collectible, any item worth collecting, I think will have people, maybe not as many as there were, definitely not as many as there were, but they'll still have people who are very interested in buying them. A lot of people like to harp on and discuss how Beanie Babies once upon a time in the mid 90s were extremely valuable. They were the NFTs of the day. And of course, it ended up turning out that they weren't as rare as some people thought they were. They weren't as valuable as some people thought they were. A lot of speculative money just kind of vanished overnight when it comes to Beanie Babies. But a lot of people tend to forget, when discussing the collapse of Beanie Babies, that over time, some Beanie Babies, obviously not Claude the Crab, because if this one had shot up in price, it would not be here. But some Beanie Babies have retained and have even gone up in value. There's a list of Beanie Babies. You can easily find it by Googling most expensive Beanie Babies. Some Beanie Babies are still worth ludicrous amounts of money. And there are people who are actively looking for and buying them, believe that or not. Of course, it's more the special ones or the original batches usually, but still, that does show that even in quote unquote failed collectible categories, there are still best in class items that certain collectors are still going to desire even decades after a financial collapse. Something similar happened with Atari games. A lot of Atari games uh, in the early 80s, I believe, 1982? Yeah, I think so. In the early 80s, Atari experienced an absolutely catastrophic crash. The entire video game market experienced a crash, and Atari games suffered massively as a result of that. These things got dumped, not just by households, but by stores, etc. They weren't even willing to hold on to them, and it wasn't until the full recovery of Nintendo that people started buying video games again. And for I remember growing up with Atari games that you could buy for 50 cents. I remember going to flea markets when I was just getting into retro video games for the first time, back in 2005, I think, is when I first watched AVGN, something like that. 2004, 2005. He had a website. Cinemassacre. I don't know if it's still around or not, but I know he still uploads to YouTube, which is good on him. Jesus, that guy's been going at this for 2 decades plus. Mad lad. But I remember when, back in the day, early 2000s at least, I had gained an interest in retro gaming because of him, and I went to flea markets and garage sales and even retro video game stores, and you could safely buy even really nice Atari games, even ones that were like Pitfall. I remember you could buy Pitfall for $1. But that price tag hasn't stayed the same, and now as time moves forward, some Atari games, despite the crash, despite the ready availability of a lot of them, and the primitive nature of them, they still have collectors that are super interested in paying more than $1 for some of these games, especially if you have one of the rarer games, one of the more desirable games. And I think that's two different kinds of collapses. Beanie Babies was a speculative crash. Atari games was a full market crash because of oversaturation. That's two different kinds of examples of total market failure, total loss in certain examples. But even now, decades later, those collectibles still, for some of them, have people who are absolutely willing to pay a premium for the rarest, most desirable ones out there. So I think that same outcome is possible for TCGs if the entire TCG market collapses, because there's a bazillion sets coming out per game, and there's 30 TCGs on the market, and stores are overloaded with product, and players can't get they can't get enough of it, right? There's just so much of it, right? Or it can't get too much. What's the opposite of can't get enough? Whatever that phrase is. There's just so much out there flooding the market. If speculators left the market and caused a price crash, and increased print capacity causes a price crash to go further, and everything goes to zero, I doubt that would be the end. Not of everything. Do I think that a lot of... I should have grabbed a card example. Do I think a lot of these common cards from Flesh and Blood or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! Will go to zero and absolutely be launched into the dumpster? Yeah. Do I think bulk would become effectively worthless rather than practically worthless? Yes, I do. But I still think that in a situation where the TCG market experiences a collapse similar to what Beanie Babies or Atari experienced, I think that, like Beanie Babies or Atari, there would still be some diamonds in the trash heap, so to say. There would still be cards best in class. There would still be products best in class that people would be absolutely willing to pay a premium for, even after what seems like a total market collapse. So yeah, it's possible that destined rivals could get dropped by the speculators. and Pokemon could print it into the ground in the next 6 months. And so the booster boxes themselves end up collapsing all the way down to $0. But that doesn't mean Destined Rivals won't have any desire to it. In fact, it might just mean that the desire is able to catch up for a bit. And if the entire Pokemon market collapses and every Pokemon set goes to zero and all the Pokemon commons go to zero and all that jazz, well, then I think products like Destined Rivals will still have people absolutely willing to pay money for them. Not a lot of money, perhaps, at that time, because, big collapse just happened. But I do think people would be willing to pay more than for, I don't know, probably more for Scarlet Violet's Destined Rival than, say, I'm willing to bet that Destined Rivals would outperform like Vivid Voltage or something in a market collapse, right? Vivid Voltage isn't that great of a set. Paradox Rift or Scarlet Violet Base or I don't know. Someone name some bad Pokemon sets. I know Paradox right there, but still. But my point is, if there's one thing to take out of this video, it's that there are some people out there who are massively apprehensive about the current state of the market, and they think that there's a huge chance that it could all go to zero. And it's true, it could. It absolutely could. But history has shown us, I'm really glad that didn't collapse. It's a very fragile pile of Atari games. History has shown us that even total collapses don't necessarily erase all money from a market. It just slashes off a lot of the most reckless money. So keep that in mind. If you're looking for safe havens for the future to avoid total collapse, and you're actually legitimately worried about what could theoretically happen at some point in the future. Again, I'm not saying that the market could collapse. I'm just saying that people have thought about it and talked about it and all that jazz. If it's a genuine worry for you, is what I'm trying to say, I have all the best in slot items. The most playable, most in-demand cards. For Magic the Gathering, it's obviously going to be things like dual lands or whatever. Collector boxes that have serialized cards, because those are genuinely desirable now. For Yu-Gi-Oh! It's going to be the oldest stuff. For Pokemon, it's going to be a lot of the older stuff. Find an expert in the field and see what they're buying. It's probably going to be older. It's probably going to be vintage for whatever the card game is. Except for Force of Will. Force of Will Vintage is not doing great compared to Force of Will newer stuff. No one wants Curse of the Frozen Casket. They want, like, the new shininess. I should talk about the Force of Will Vintage market. I have so much Force of Will to talk about, but that's a video for another day. Anyway, mostly I just wanted to talk about the little crab guy. Crabs are awesome. They're nature's perfect machine. I should do a crab video. Ah, well, that's also another video topic. Anyway, I'm gonna get majorly off topic if I keep going like this. So please like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you agree with me, disagree with me, or think Claude is the best Beanie Baby. Little hint, he is. Check out the Discord. Check out the Patreon. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao.